So there my starting is. Good afternoon again. First order of business, a roll call, please.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Here. Commissioner Banton.
Present.
Commissioner Boaz. Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Present.
Commissioner Kim.
Present.
Commissioner Williams.
Present.
Chair Strother.
Present.
We have a quorum of 7.
All right, thank you for that. The next order of business would be the approval of minutes. They have been provided to the commissioners. I would entertain a motion to accept them as they are or with any changes.
I move that we accept the minutes as they are. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, seconded by Commissioner Gill. Call for vote, please.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Banton.
Abstain.
Commissioner Boaz. Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Aye.
Commissioner Kim.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams. Chair Strother.
Abstain.
And the motion passes with 4 voting aye and 3 abstentions.
And just so everybody knows, the reason there are so many extensions, because you have to be present to vote on the minutes that are placed before you. And I know some of us were not available to do that or be there at the appropriate time. There's one action item which we will have a presentation by the staff. At that point, we will then have a public hearing. As everyone knows, I will then open the public hearing, entertain questions from those in that agenda. Then we'll close the public hearing and have questions and discussion from the commission. If you are here for the public hearing or want to make statements for the public hearing, please be sure Michelle has your name, or if you're online, please be sure to include it in the chat. At that point, we'll entertain, as I said, we typically ask you to 2 minutes for conversation for statements. Questions will then we'll go back to the appropriate parties if need be. So with that, I will turn it over to staff for the presentation on the agenda item. Thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Miriam Keller. Good evening, chairman and members of the commission. I'll be presenting on agenda item number 3, potential text amendment to the zoning code addressing hours of operation for marijuana dispensary facilities. And I'll provide an initial presentation, but also joining me this evening are several members of the planning and zoning team who also assisted in this kind of quick work on this item, including sitting next to me, zoning administrator Mary Burton, and we can she'll fill in gaps in my presentation, and then we can jointly answer questions at the commission. So as the chair discussed, this item will include a quick staff presentation, a public hearing, and then of course commission questions and discussions, and an opportunity for planning commission action, or in other words, recommendation of regulations to the Board of Aldermen on this subject. So I'll return to this slide at the end of the presentation, but going in, I want to provide an overview of kind of the 2, but in fact, 3 options that staff are providing as recommendations to the commission regarding dispensary hours of operation, with the first option supported by kind of our research and analysis being to extend hours from the current closing time of 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. The second option, option B, to allow extended hours kind of in a flexible way through a conditional use process that could be as late as midnight, or it could also involve earlier hours. And then a third option is actually a combination of the 2 options. Because options A and B are not mutually exclusive, they could be recommended in tandem. So that's kind of the bottom line, but now I'll provide a little bit of background. Including sort of how we got to where we are now with our current regulations. As members of the commission know, and likely members of the public tuning in as well, there have been 2 Missouri state constitutional amendments legalizing marijuana, first for medical uses in amendment number 2, and then for recreational or quote unquote comprehensive marijuana use through state amendment number 3. And the city, to remain in compliance with this new legalization, permitted associated medical marijuana uses through amendments to the zoning code. So recommended by the Planning Commission first in 2019, and then enacted as ordinance in June of 2019, and then recommended by the Planning Commission in 2023, subsequently enacted by ordinance. And since that time, there have been 13 dispensaries to open up in the city, alongside other various marijuana associated uses. But of course, the subject of discussion tonight is dispensaries. There have been kind of in this time that marijuana uses have been permitted in the city of St. Louis. There have been a number of other questions related to how we might amend the zoning code to address marijuana. And I want to clarify that this evening, the subject and recommendation requested by the Planning Commission is addressing specifically operating hours, and that's highlighted here. And just want to recognize the kind of quickly changing landscape around these uses, an evolving marketplace, and also evolving public acceptance and outlook on marijuana use and marijuana consumption in the city, but I think also nationally, recognizing that. This slide begins to introduce kind of in a very basic way how we currently regulate marijuana-related land uses in the city. And this is a very simplified way of describing it, and commissioners have in their packet much more detailed information about the current approach to regulation. So the first piece of the zoning regulations are definitions that describe the specific different types of uses associated with marijuana. The second part of the zoning regulation is a use table, which very simply describes which types of marijuana uses are permitted in which districts, and whether they're permitted by right or as conditional uses, or whether they are not allowed or not permitted in a given zoning district. But the third major component are site requirements. And those describe kind of the baseline expectations of conditions attached to permits, whether conditional use permits or permits by right, to operate a marijuana-related facility in the city. And there are site requirements for all marijuana-related uses, as well as site requirements specific to dispensaries, whether medical or recreational. So the use table is here. The colors aren't appearing as I expected, but I've highlighted here the use table, or the portion of the use table relevant to dispensaries more generally, as well as dispensaries that might involve curbside delivery or a sales and service window. So you can see that generally they are not allowed in districts A through E, which are residential and multifamily districts. For dispensaries, generally, they are conditionally allowed, they're conditional uses in the F district and then permitted by right in G through L districts. For dispensaries that have kind of unique conditions or unique qualities like curbside delivery or sales and service window, those are conditional uses in zones F through L, kind of recognizing that those types of characteristics may or may not be appropriate in a given location within zoning districts F through L. And so the conditional use permit process allows for a specific consideration of a use in a given location, and also allows the staff alongside the Board of Public Service to identify other conditions on a facility's operation to ensure that a use can be made to be appropriate within its specific context. So that's the use table. But the current regulation of hours of operation is outlined within the site requirements. And the current regulation, I'm gonna get this little thing out of the way, for dispensaries is that the facility's hours of operation shall be limited to from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday through Saturday. So that is the current requirement. That is a baseline, no matter which district a dispensary might be operating within, and whether it's conditional or permitted by right, that hours of operation site requirement or condition on operation applies. I mentioned before that there are 13 existing dispensaries within the city, and we've mapped them here with little red dots, but we've also provided a little bit of the context about dispensaries operating outside of the city in neighboring jurisdictions, because we understand one part of this question is how dispensaries in the city may be regulated in the city relative to neighboring jurisdictions, because of course, these uses exist within a regional marketplace. So we see that most dispensaries are actually, they've been located within the F neighborhood commercial zoning districts. And then the next most common type of location that dispensaries are already located is in the G, local commercial and office district. And then we have 4 others, one each in the H area commercial district, I central business district, or that's mainly downtown, J industrial district, and the K unrestricted district. In the resolution or the memo provided by staff, we also described some of the context about a number of dispensaries which have been granted variances to operate with later hours than 8 p.m. And each of those dispensaries has been granted the variance to operate with hours as late as midnight. And those variances which have been granted, the locations associated with those variances are highlighted here in little pink diamonds. There is also a 4th variance which has been applied for, but has not yet been heard by the Board of Adjustment. Oh, and I meant to share the context that these dispensaries where variances have been granted exist kind of within dense, kind of walkable commercial districts that I think one could describe as entertainment-oriented districts. So we have the Del Mar Loop, the Grove, and then the Cherokee district, Cherokee Street. We also mapped each of these because the zoning district they lie within, of course, is part of the context, but also their surrounding context, just to give you an idea of the types of places that dispensaries are choosing to locate. So here's one in the F business district. You can see sort of generally surrounded by, or really immediately adjacent to, areas zoned A, single family. Here's one in the G local district at kind of a higher traffic intersection. I'm going to go through these quickly, but of course we can come back to any. One here in Gravois Park, another here. This is the one in the H area commercial district. Another here, again, in a sort of more auto-oriented location in St. Louis Hills. One in the G commercial district in Kosciuszko, local commercial and office district, excuse me. Here's one in the industrial district, one in the unrestricted district, several more in the F neighborhood commercial district, but generally kind of within commercial corridors, but adjacent to residential neighborhoods. A couple of others that generally match those characteristics. And then the final one in the I Central Business District located downtown. We also looked to regulations in nearby jurisdictions and comparison cities, both to ask the question of others in the region, other dispensary operators in the region, what are the hours that they're being allowed to operate within? And here you can see that within the region, closing hours are generally capped at 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. And then looking at other cities, which are not necessarily locations where direct competitors would locate, they're in different regions altogether, of course, but generally we see the same closing hours of 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. And then with a little bit of an outlier in Minnesota, where we see very late night hours permitted. However, not all dispensaries take advantage of those late night hours because, the economics of staffing that late may or may not work depending on the location. So that brings us back to kind of the staff recommendations around options. And This provides a little bit more context about each of those options, options A and option B. So the first option would be to simply extend the closing hours listed in that site requirement from 8 p.m. as they currently are to 10 p.m. That change in the regulations would be a super simple one, just striking out that 8 p.m., adding 10 p.m. in its place. And the intent of this option would be to kind of eliminate any operational disadvantage for dispensaries in the city by just simply extending permitted operating hours to match the very latest permitted hours in adjacent or nearby jurisdictions, both within Missouri and in Illinois. I think we arrived at this or identified it as sort of an incremental step toward flexibility in hours of operation, acknowledging the kind of ongoing process of community kind of outlook and adaptation to these new uses and how they fit into our neighborhoods and our city. And then just acknowledging that in this option, dispensaries would otherwise be regulated, whether permitted by right or permitted as a conditional use, kind of as currently reflected in the existing use table. So that is option A, just kind of in very short summary, no longer 8 p.m., but 10 p.m. as the new site requirement for any dispensary in any district. Option B would be just very slightly different. And by the way, not mutually exclusive from option A. These could be recommended in combination. And option B would be to allow for extended hours, kind of undetermined, via a conditional use process. And the way the regulations would be updated to show that is to update the use table with some additional language to reflect that dispensaries with extended hours, either earlier hours or later hours, would be permitted conditionally in districts where they are currently allowed either permitted or by right or conditionally. And so just as a refresher of the benefits of the conditional use process is that it involves a public hearing, so the opportunity for neighborhood input and kind of a gauge of public perception about the suitability of extended hours in a given location. Then a staff recommendation to the Board of Public Service, kind of acknowledging and incorporating the findings from that public comment, about a Board of Public Service determination, and then if there is denial, as in any denial of a building or occupancy permit, an opportunity to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. And then kind of embedded within this opportunity for a recommendation is to allow for site and case-specific considerations and the addition of additional conditions as appropriate. But there are additional pieces of this intent or kind of the idea behind this recommendation, which is that based on the experience so far with dispensaries and where we see later operating hours being kind of accepted and found to be acceptable by the community and where there's comfort, is that later hours may be more appropriate in some locations than others. So in an entertainment district, for example, where you're actually, or a neighborhood may have an interest in trying to promote kind of pedestrian activity late at night. Maybe you have a music venue across the street, a late night diner down the street. That type of kind of late night activity might be desirable, and a late night dispensary could be, a very positive contribution to that. But there might be other locations where it might not seem as natural a fit necessarily. For example, like a location on a higher traffic commercial corridor, very immediately adjacent to a residential area. I think in some of the planning commission's exposure to community perception around these uses, we've kind of encountered a case very similar to this along Hampton Avenue. And so I don't claim to have a perfect finger on the pulse of public perception on this issue, but I think kind of our collective experience on staff highlighted that, basically it might be great in some locations, it might not be obviously great in other locations to have very late night hours. So a conditional use process would allow for site and case specific consideration of later or earlier hours, maintain an opportunity for community input into that site-specific evaluation, and then allow for zoning staff to identify additional conditions as appropriate to help integrate a later night dispensary use into a given location. So the way this regulation would be kind of enacted through a text amendment would simply be to add this and/or extended hours to this part of the use table where other types of special conditions are also being treated as conditional uses. So curbside delivery or a sales and service window, extended hours in this scenario would simply be added to that list of types of dispensaries that would be treated as a conditional use. So these are the three options, again, at the highest level, and kind of showing an option C, which is really a combination of options A and B, but they're not mutually exclusive, to both extend hours to 10 p.m. and to allow further extended hours through a conditional use process.
I'll get you a drink of water.
That's together.
Oh, so yeah, he's in the brownie. Okay, thank you very much for the work that you put into this. And I'm going to ask if you are online, there's a chat. I'm not sure if that's a public hearing person. Can you open that up to see what that response is? If you're online for a public hearing, please put your name. Might be from before. Okay, just want to be sure. Prior to me opening the public hearing, I just want to ask some quick questions. You can, this will relieve some of the questions I'm sure you get. You said there were 3 variances currently on the hours. Who grants those I believe you said it's the Board of Adjustments.
Yeah, this
Do
is,
we know what the reason for the variances were?
All three of them.
Identify yourself, please, just for the recordings. Yeah.
Mary Burton. So all three of them were to extend the hours of operation to midnight, and those were the 3 that you see in the pink diamonds there. And that was the only condition that they were asking to amend. They were all 3 granted. They all 3 had neighborhood and aldermanic support when they came to the board.
Okay, and I know there's a current number 4 that's waiting for it.
Yes, it will go to the board in September. And it's rather early yet, so we haven't gotten anything in support or opposition.
And who owns the dispensary process, licensing and authorization?
State, I believe.
The state?
State,
Okay,
yes.
all right. All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing. The moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Band, second by Commissioner Kellen, call for vote.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Banton,
Aye.
Commissioner Boaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Keon,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair Strother,
Aye.
the motion passes without present voting aye.
Okay, with that, we have public hearing open. If there's anyone online, please identify yourself in the chat. If you're present in the room, please be sure your name has been given to Michelle. I'll call once. Michelle, do you have any names? Call once for a public hearing in the room present. Call twice for a public hearing in the room present. Call 3 times for the public hearing, the public hearing, no response.
Chair,
that-
there's I was told Alderman Aldridge put his name in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I think that's what that chat was he was saying he wanted to be
Oh.
aligned. for public-
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not in the room, so I didn't know of the in the room and in the virtual world was 2 different things, but I am in the virtual world, not in the room.
Well, you're in the room. We'll count you in the room. With that, we'll, Aldridge, if you have any public hearing comments, go please move right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also every commissioner on this committee. But I also want to give a huge thank you to this commission for looking at the extension of dispensary hours. So this was a piece of legislation that was filed very early on after almost a year of talking with dispensary hours or dispensaries about, as you guys know, that we are not in line with our region. Majority of our region is at 10 p.m. The reason legislation that I have moving forward to file it at midnight was to, figure out ways that we could bring in more revenue for the city of St. Louis, especially with the concern of the earnings tax, which will be a huge hit within the city of St. Louis. So I know there is an option A, which will extend it from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's an option B with the conditional use. And I don't know if it's option C, it's like A and B. They can have both, but I would ask the commission to look at potentially a option D, I guess, that will allow for dispensaries to extend to the hours of 12 p.m. As I've been talking with dispensaries throughout the city of St. Louis, I know that a lot of our dispensaries would love to extend this hour to 12 p.m. because as they've closed at 8 p.m., which when they close, as I've talked to a lot of dispensaries, a lot of customers after that has shown up after those hours to be able to try to buy, but they have not been able to. And just seeing the history and also seeing, and I'm saying 12 p.m., excuse me, 12 a.m. Our dispensaries that we currently have in the city of St. Louis are very strong when it comes to regulations and securities. They're not able for individuals who are not under a certain age cannot get into these. And the goal really was extending these to 12 a.m. was for the city of St. Louis to kind of be a leader, but also when it comes to economics to be able to bring in more revenue, but to show that we can be a leader in these dispensaries hours to extend it further. As I've talked to a lot of dispensaries, in certain areas, which is more entertainment districts, they are not allowed to allow people in after a certain hour. And what they learned when maybe certain clubs or event spaces close beyond 10 p.m., that they've talked to customers that would love to still be able to come in and partake, to be able to buy either medical use or recreational use for these dispensaries. And I think this is a huge way that the city of St. Louis can be kind of, the leaders and showing like Minneapolis that, when these dispensaries are open beyond 10 p.m., that they are open in a responsible way. But to be honest, the way that I've looked at the legislation when it comes to economics of the city could be a huge help to bring in more revenue, because we are in a huge potential economic gap with the earnings tax. And we have Paul Payne, who's our budget director, who's come in front of the budget committee and talked about how the marijuana revenue will bring in potentially 2.something million, 2.45 million in the city of St. Louis. And being able to extend these hours, I believe to midnight, understand they're very strongly regulated when it comes to security, cannot just be us leading the way in the region, but also be a huge help for the city of St. Louis when it comes to revenue. I think extending it to 10 p.m. is a good option, but I would ask this commission, as I'm coming up on my 2 minutes, you give a politician a mic, they go for a while, the commission to look at, an option D, to at least allow the Board of Aldermen to vote on if 12 a.m. is a reasonable time for these dispensaries to close, as that has been asked for a lot of dispensaries to be able to close at midnight, especially in some of these entertainment districts, when some of the bars and entertainment operations are closing beyond 10 p.m. that can still bring in more revenue in the city of St. Louis.
Thank you very much. Any other public hearing statements? I see no other names in the chat. I have no other requests in the room. With that, a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Blatt, seconded by Commissioner Bradley. Call for vote.
Previous roll.
Previous roll has been called for. Any objections? Hearing no objections, with that, the public hearing is now closed. Let me thank the Alderman for his comments and his concerns. What is before us now is two things. One is I will have our commission roundtable for discussion and conversation. And then at that point, we will make a recommendation that we want to send to the board. Typically, it is incumbent on everybody else to approve the recommendation, but in this case, we will make what recommendation we have as a commission settle on. So with that, I will start with Commissioner Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Any questions or conversation or discussion?
I just want to hear from the rest of the commission because of course I see both sides of it. In addition to, I also see the concern in the community, you know, with the extensions.
Okay.
And so, and of course, everyone knows I'm a fan of zoning and conditional uses and hearings and bringing people before the public. And, I shared that, continue to share that concern with everything. So, again, I want to hear from my fellow commission members to see if we come to a consensus on one of those or maybe do something different.
Okay, Commissioner Banton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First, question for actually potentially Roman Hubbard, Clark Hubbard, as well as Mary Harper here. For the three dispensaries that do have the late hours, I just coincidentally happened to be on that Board of Adjustment hearing meeting when those three came to the board. And yes, they had support, but there wasn't, a lot of people there necessarily voicing their support. I'm curious, has the zoning department or have you as, an alderperson heard any issues so far related to any of those three that are open later? And have they even implemented that yet, as far as you know?
As far as I know, they've all implemented staying open late.
Okay.
I can say that since marijuana was first recognized or legalized in the city, we've only had one complaint about one dispensary. And it was not any of the dispensaries with the extended hours.
Okay.
And it was not about hours, it was about parking.
That's ironic because that's the only complaint I have as well with the one in our ward is the parking issue.
It's interesting because the parking complaint came once adult use marijuana was added to the business and then the business expanded.
Yeah.
And had a lot more customers, so.
Question for staff, and should have maybe done a little bit more research on this, but are there other certain businesses where we regulate other than bars? I would say, I guess, merchandising businesses, like in, CVS or Walgreens, for example, where we regulate hours of operation and close times.
So I can't say that there's anything that has a condition automatically attached to it like this, but almost every business that comes before the Board of Adjustment or a conditional use hearing will get some sort of hours condition on them. It's normally what the applicant testifies to, unless of course there's opposition at the hearing. Then the board might decide to do something differently. But there are a plethora of businesses that have hours.
But if they were in a zone where they were given, they're allowed to be by right, there's no, for many businesses, there's no condition at all on operating hours. So, I guess follow-up question to that is, I can understand the reasoning for this particular business type to assume that it should have operating hours, just given the nature of what they're selling. But I can also counterpoint to that is they're selling a product, they have a bunch of other measures in place to help protect that product already, supposedly. How is it any different than 24-hour, Walgreens, for example, that's just selling stuff? If there's not any, partaking of the product at that particular place, it's just a shop essentially. I don't know, is there any reasoning from the city's perspective on why there should be any regulation at all on hours of operation?
So we first had hours of operation because the state law had hours of operation in the dispensary. We understand now that the state law has changed and that many of the conditions that we have on the dispensaries have loosened up. So that's how we first got to the hours of operation. If we had had more time to do a more comprehensive study of what the state law now says, we may have been recommending other things, but we were on a very tight turnaround could get this back to the planning commission.
So it's safe to say that you don't know for sure at the moment what state allows or doesn't allow in terms of hours of operation for these. But we're assuming it allows it at least still.
Yes,
10
we
p.m.
have been told that it does allow for later hours than what the city currently has. How late, I'm not sure.
Last question, is there anywhere in your research for cities or municipalities in the state of Missouri where it's open later than 10 p.m.?
Look outside the region, really, or did we, to Kansas City?
Still 10. The only places I think that were later than 10 were like big cities. Like Boston has no regulations on any of it. New York, I don't think it's a ton. Colorado, I mean, I think all the, but I don't think anything around here. I think Kansas City was still 10 o'clock. I think, yeah, because I think most places, yeah, maybe 10.
And I just thought of one more, sorry, one last quick one. So option B, where the conditional, we're adding additional language to the conditional use. That's not really changing anything except making it more clear perhaps in zoning that they have that option to extend their hours, because they already have that option currently right now, correct?
They have the option now, but currently they would have to go to the Board of Adjustment. Where we've made it a little simpler in that option where they would just go to a conditional use hearing. Simpler in the fact that it's a little quicker to get on a conditional use agenda, and it's cheaper to go to a conditional
That's
use
good.
hearing.
Good information. Thank you. No further questions for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Band and Commissioner Boyes.
Go back to that.
If I can, Chair Stroud, I just wanted to add that I think just for a little context, some of the concern with the extended hours, I think it's gonna be different for a dispensary versus when we move into, what is it gonna be called, where they can use it in the consumption lounge and things like that. And so the crowd, you know, the control of what the space is gonna turn into after that, I think will be a concern. And, so again, I wanna make sure we keep that, because I don't quite myself, if we do this, does that go for consumption lounges? Okay, so, 'cause I know the dispensaries are pretty regulated, like, Commissioner Banton said about how many can be in and out, what goes, you know, it's not a crowd, it's very crowd controlled in those, but consumption lounge and other things are something different. So that's what I wanted to be clear on, and for the public that might be listening, to be clear on.
So none of these options would extend hours for consumption lounges. Consumption lounges are currently not defined, so they fall under the other category.
Commissioner Boyes.
The only question I had was about, kind of following on the counterpoint to Commissioner Patton's question, was about places that do not regulate the hours. And did you say it was New
The
York?
only one I found that had no regulations, like in terms of hours, was just Boston.
Boston. Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess my leaning is to do the conditional use, just because as I look at the maps of all of the locations right now, they just vary so much. And to have a later time in a place like the Central West End or the Loop, places where it's not going to affect neighbors much, it makes sense to me to allow later hours, but not necessarily the ones that are like directly across from or behind. Anyway, adjacent to a residential area. So that's my question and comment.
I should clarify before that however the regulations change, any dispensary that's currently operating would continue to operate under the permit that they were first granted. So there would have to be a reapplication. Am I getting this right, Mary? There would have to be a reapplication for hours to be adjusted.
Actually, they would apply to amend their original.
Oh, to say, clarify this statement again.
So.
Well, I just want to clarify for anybody in the public that if a regulation related to hours were to change, that wouldn't change overnight the hours that existing dispensaries could operate within. So just in terms of what the public could or couldn't expect. Now, the mechanism for that change Mary was describing.
Right, so right now, if we adopt the option where it's a conditional use, anybody who is out there operating with a limit of 8 p.m. would have to go to a conditional use to be open till 10 p.m.
Right.
It's not like an
Conditional
automatic.
use, yes. But
Yes.
if, and I'm just saying, if we do a straight hour change,
Mhm.
there is no need for the business itself to make any changes.
No, anybody who's already got a license automatically has that 8 o'clock closing time attached to them. So whatever we pass, if they want to stay open later, however we pass it,
Yeah.
right, they're gonna have to go. through
Those still-
that process. Yeah.
Those team that you listed still have to come back and make a, oh, I just want to be sure I'm
It
hearing.
would actually be 10 since 3 of them.
Yeah, already.
So did I hear you say that the three won't be grandfathered? They will have to go through the application process also?
They have already gone through it. But the other 10 that are out there that still have the 8 o'clock on
Yeah.
it, if we pass something that says they can be open till 10, they'll have to go back to get that change.
Okay.
And going back, it comes to your office, not going through the conditional use.
Whatever we adopt, if we say it's a conditional use, then they'll have to go to a conditional use. Right now, they go to variance.
I'm saying option A, if we just do a straight hour change
Right,
without conditional use,
right.
does that dispensary need to now come and file for a variance or change?
Yes, because the only way to get that condition changed is to go back to a hearing to get it changed.
Okay,
If it's a use by right.
If it's a use by right, it doesn't have to. Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If it's a use by right, it doesn't have to.
That's what I'm asking you. If we-
Okay, I'm sorry. I
If
thought
we
you-
just, if all
Right.
we do is change, go,
Yeah, I was
to-
gonna go to this guy. So if we were to change, yeah, you'd have to apply for a new permit. And I believe that if the planning, or if the law changed to 10 p.m. and say somebody's in an H district, you're
Right.
permitted by right, you just apply, you reapply for this permit, and then you would get that 10 p.m. Now, if you also had a sales or service window, or if you were this kind of dispensary in the F district, then you're going,
Back to conditional use.
right.
Correct.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Boyce, go ahead, you were questioning. Okay, Commissioner Bradley, any questions or comments?
Yeah, so I want to be real clear on if we go to the conditional use process in either B or A plus B. And the conditional use process allows for extended hours. Can an applicant come in and ask to be open beyond midnight then? Could they come in and ask to be open till 1, 2, 3? Or again, does state law govern what the maximum hours of being open are?
Everybody's turning their head, and I don't know if staff has an answer to that.
Yeah, they could ask for any time, but then that ask would be evaluated by staff, by the community, and by the Board of Public Service at that time.
Correct, but then here, I guess, is the thing, so right now, you're saying in this presentation that staff feels comfortable that 10 p.m. more or less falls within the realm of what everybody's doing. The alderman is asking for midnight for additional revenue increase. And so here's where I think the problem comes in is unless we have a definitive end time for some reason, what stops 12 from becoming 1, 2, 3? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it could continue to grow. And then, of course, the problem, or well, not actually a problem, but one of the issues with conditional use is that then, of course, if zoning gets complaints because someone's operating beyond those hours or being a nuisance property or whatever the violation of the conditions are, then we start to execute that whole process of a revocation hearing. And then, again, it goes through that process. If the BPS says no, then the Board of Adjustment can appeal. They can appeal a Board of Adjustment. So I guess I would lean, to me, one way to be more definitive for everybody so that it was a conformance thing. And if they particularly had to have a reason to do it, then we would grant that variance, which I think is what we do today. But if we get to the conditional use process, then I think it's gonna be hard to justify one approving one versus another because of maybe a location of where it is on a business street, a commercial area versus a more residential area. I think it introduces a lot of interpretation from us that someone could say we're losing business because you allowed these other three to do it, but you didn't allow us to do it. Which is, and generally, it goes back to what the Board of Adjustment is doing now, right? Did I confuse you all?
Yes, Larry, shaking her head, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so,
Doing
so
an
now what
example.
happens is if they want to get additional hours, they go to the Board of Adjustment, they make a case. The Board of Adjustment weighs out whatever is there and says yay or nay. That's it. But I'm saying that without a definitive ending time frame of time based on a state law or some regulation, this could grow into something through a conditional use that's going to become very interpretive for the zoning department to say yes or no. Mary, do you agree with me or no?
I'm still a little confused.
Well, let me back up. One thing, Rich, that I think is a question that we have not answered. What is the state town limit at
That's
North?
right. That's correct.
That's the first
You're right.
question.
You are exactly correct. That is
If it's 2 o'clock, no matter what anybody requests, they can't get beyond 2 o'clock.
correct. And I think that's where I'm going. What is the ultimate limit? And what limits them from requesting something even, because it says additional hours, what limits them from requesting beyond midnight at this point? I don't know the answer to that. And I
Well,
don't think you guys do either.
a couple of thoughts. I did try to review state law and found no mention of hours at this time. Now, I can't speak with the authority of an attorney for the city at all, and there, as I think Mary mentioned, we were kind of making fast work of it, and battling like a lot of other things, so we didn't have time for that thorough interaction on this topic. But I'm just sharing, I tried to check into it with my non-lawyer brain to see if we're like, obviously, and I didn't see any mention of hours. But that's one thought. But the second thought is that within option B, I think we could figure out a way to put a cap on the time. So if there was a desire to set like a maximum late time at, say, midnight, but also the desire for a site-specific evaluation and also the opportunity for community input in that evaluation, there could be called an option B2, where it's a conditional use process for hours beyond whatever the baseline is, 10 PM or 8 PM, but also a cap on those extended hours at midnight. That, I think that's
Yep.
an option that might resolve part of your concern,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
that's exactly what I'm asking for, is that
Yes.
we would have to determine what a cap is some way or another so that it doesn't morph into something we can't manage.
And something that would say nothing to exceed state hours of, maximum closing time.
Correct.
At any
That's all I
point.
have.
Okay, that's all, yeah, thanks, Rich. Commissioner Garmedia?
Thanks so much. I just want to remind, I think I'd like to return to Alderman Aldridge's request from talking to dispensaries, that he's not asking for extended hours through conditional use process, like none of this 2 AM, 3 AM. So, he's asking for midnight. And I think, and I want to note a few things. We weren't able to hear from community in this hearing, and which I think is a key component is appetite. And I think just to talk through a few scenarios, if we were to recommend midnight, it would then go to the Board of Aldermen, and alders would be hearing from their constituents, and Alderman Aldridge would need 8 votes for that to pass. If we were to vote against midnight as a group, and say, we do not recommend midnight, then he would have to get 10 votes. So he'd have to get a lot more support for that. And so that's, since the Board of Aldermen is pretty good at getting community out to come to its hearings, to hear from them. We'd also hear from more dispensaries. I'd like to, you know, I would like to be able to make the motion for option C. No matter what the planning commission, you know, what every other planning commissioner thinks, I'd like to have the option to make that motion. If that doesn't pass, I would prefer the clarity of option A, just because part of this, having some clarity on what hours we're offering, and I'd like them to be competitive. I'd like us to be able to attract more dispensaries, aka more tax dollars into the city. Clarity is a key marketing tool, and being able to say you can operate later here in the city of St. Louis than in the surrounding area, that's a marketing tool. But saying you have to go through a conditional use hearing not exactly a marketing tool. So those are some of my feelings about the issue. I think this is, if we're waiting to hear for about community, you know, consent, the forum for that is the Board of Aldermen. And so if we, as the Planning Commission, can be more flexible with what we recommend, saying up to midnight, then that negotiation can happen at the board. You know, Alderman Aldridge might not be able to get enough support for midnight. He might be able to negotiate 11 p.m. He might be able to negotiate 10 p.m. From the fellow alders. They're not a monolith here. I'd like him to have that opportunity to make that case to the rest of the board. So those are my current thoughts, and I'll love to hear what the rest of the commission has to think, what they think about this issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly?
So for the 3 variances, did they ask to be open till 10 p.m. or was it granted up to midnight? Can you give us more background on that, Mary?
They all 3 asked to be open till midnight.
But they only open till 10?
No, they're all open till midnight.
No, there's hours or, like, there can be open to minutes, but on their website, their hours are just till 10.
Okay, and we don't know why, Michael, why they chose to stay open till 10 instead of
If
midnight?
I'm remembering the adjustment meeting, right, they said 12, they wanted the option if they had like, if there was an event where they, you know, or the one on the, like, if there was a concert, then for that day, they could then be open for that one, but they didn't think at the time they would be open till midnight every day on a regular basis.
So if we went with the options you all presented today, PD and zoning, option B, A plus B. If I'm understanding that, it's that 10 p.m. would change as a permitted use, and then anything else, if they want to open till midnight, if that's the boundary we set, it would need to be a conditional use hearing to extend it from 10 to midnight.
Or if they wanted to open earlier, they would go to a conditional use. Right now, they all have a regulation of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we would be changing it to in A to let them stay open till 10. And then the B part, if somebody wants to stay open past 10 or wants to open prior to 8 a.m., they would go to a conditional use hearing.
I'll let Aaron, I think you're next. Oh, I'm sorry, is Aaron next?
Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to. Just interrupt it, Commissioner Williams.
You're being last, all the questions have been asked.
And more discussion, you don't.
Well, one thing, we're talking about being competitive. Right now, licensure is really heavily regulated by the state, right? And when licenses are available, it's not like it sits on the shelf. They're applying for them, so. While I while I agree that it's good practice to at least be par with our regional peers, I don't think this is a discussion about competitive nature at this point in time, because it's so young. Still in its infancy. You only have 13 dispensaries here. That's not a lot. I, like Alderwoman Clark, I would believe in the power of conditional use hearings, so. I mean, it's already allowing for that, so I guess I'm not really suggesting anything different there. From the state that just giving community the opportunity to provide input separate from the track of going through their auto person. Or when conditions ask for, a variation. Other than that, I think everybody said it.
Okay.
Oh, you have something?
Good chocolate arching.
Going to speak kind of from the goddess of Janus, looking at this two sides. As a consumer and as a business, as a consumer, I want you available when I want it. Point blank. So as you said, Jake, earlier, you're providing a product, all safeguards are in place. Why are we limiting the consumer business to a point that may hinder the business? And as Alderman Aldridge said, economically, why are we becoming more difficult in the city to provide services? That's one side of it. The other side says, yes, we have a conditional use process so that if you want to extend your hours, you can go through that. So if you want to open earlier, you go through that conditional use process. I think that's there, that's available if you want to do it. Economically, if A is an option, 10 o'clock is an option. We could make it 11:45 if we wanted to, as a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. They still have to deal with it. So if we said 12, A has to happen, if I understand correctly. Me, John Doe dispensary still have to come back and reapply for that new hour. That's the permitting, that's first. Regardless of what the time change is, that has to happen. If I want to stay open to 12:30 or 1 o'clock, now it's a conditional use that comes to you because it's beyond your recommended hour, your guidance hours. Yes. And or A, B, C could be extended to hour 11:30 and extended our conditional uses. We have that ability to make any of those recommendations. And it still requires neighborhood, give me automatic support. What did I just say?
Conditional use,
I'm
board of
sorry?
adjustment, conditional use. Board of
Conditional use, and so all of those safeguards are still in place. So are we going to be more, and I think the staff has done a wonderful job in getting what you could in such short time. Because we still don't know what the state says. And theoretically, if the state says 2 o'clock, that's the max that anybody could do, regardless of what they want to do. So as a chair, my recommendation is that you extend the hours to 12, put a conditional use for anything else on that and call it a day. Because I don't know if 10 or what are we doing by 10 or 12? Going from 8 to 10 or 8 to 12?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Did you say that you want to extend it by 12 as a conditional use or permitted use?
As a permitted use by
Okay.
12. And if there's any change or variance to that, it goes through conditional use.
So if I'm the alderman for the neighborhood that has the shop that's right across from next to the residential housing,
Mhm.
then I have no control that they get to stay open until midnight no matter what?
No, they still have to come through.
No.
Oh, okay, that's why I was asking.
Yeah,
That's why I was asking, okay.
permitted use
So let's-
means anyone can be open till 12 if they want to be.
So, okay.
With that type of action with the numbers and the clock. Let me do a couple things that I think you just got us started on. and you just reminded us. And it's going to end with an answer, a question from Mary. Is if we could go back to the paper. The three options. Option A, we talked about extend hours to 10. And what we've been thought of making not 100% confident that we're getting to the point that, to do that, once this became law, is they go to Mary's office and make an application. And you can approve it over the counter for it to be extended to 10.
Without committee or automatic engagement.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that is what would happen. If it's extended to 10, they have the right to come in and pay a small fee and get it over the counter. The other option is, we leave that, extend it to 10, coming in and changing your permit. But if you wanted to go more, you would then be eligible by whatever parameters we put on it, to say, hey, I'd like to go through the conditional use process to be open beyond 10. And when the conditional use process comes around, that's often viewed in the neighborhoods of where, hey, we get to come and testify and voice our concerns about, hey, wait a second, 10:30 would even be pushing it in this area, or 12 or whatnot. That tradition of neighborhoods coming and speaking at a conditional use hearing for that extension past 10, whatever it is. The question I have to ask Mary is just in the conditional use process, are there other things that might be added as a condition of their permit?
Sure, it's open.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You've opened the application at the conditional use hearing, so they could end up with many other conditions on them or not.
Right.
Just depends.
So are we becoming more bureaucratic or less bureaucratic?
More flexible.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
So I'll
Because the conditional use process already exists, so it's not more bureaucratic.
Okay,
About the same, sounds like.
Well, but it's gotten a little easier with the conditional use process
The
versus.
conditional
Made it
use
cheaper.
it's cheaper and it's a little quicker to get on an agenda.
Better for a business owner to go through a conditional use hearing compared to a board of adjustment hearing. It's better for the city to not grant variances. So it's in the best interest of the city that we make a recommendation that would suit most of the 13
There's a
plus
comment,
businesses,
Commissioner Garmedia, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. And I did just want to note that hours of operation is also a personal business decision. If you're open properly later, you are going to have more security. And if things are not going, like if it's dangerous or other things are happening, you won't necessarily extend your hours. Like just if we were to do option C, extend out permitted hours by right to midnight, doesn't mean that every business will do that. But they'll have the right to. So I just wanted to note that because I know we're talking about like, is it automatic or will they have to go back before somebody to change their existing hours? And not I wouldn't say necessarily every dispensary would do that. But this is something we could find out in the public hearing at the Board of Aldermen too. So I just wanted to note that since we started talking about it.
Could we go back to the slide real quick that lists how many are in a use by right zone and how many are in a conditional use zone? That one.
In this listing, it is only F where those without a curbside pickup or drive-through or sales window are conditional uses, and all of these others, if you're just a regular dispensary without a sales window or curbside pickup, you would be permitted by right.
So if we extended to 10 or 12 or whatever, it would only be these 5 that would be able to go to the counter and change their permit.
Right.
And all the rest of them would still have to go through
Right.
the Board of Adjustment.
So if you said
All the way around.
10 p.m.
If we changed it to a later hour, no matter what it is, is it only the ones in the zones that are by right that can do the counter option?
Right.
And everyone else would still have to go through the Board of Adjustment
Or conditional use,
or
whatever.
conditional use?
Right.
Yeah, it would be
Hearing.
these, so right now, because of how it's treated in the use table, if you're in the F neighborhood commercial district, you're a conditional use no matter what. So like that's the process for you. No matter the hours that we place on the site condition or the site requirements, it's all these guys that, if we just change the hours, they could do it over the counter.
Gotcha.
permanently.
So it's the
Everything
8
but-
Right. It's
that
just,
would would get it, and those 5 would have to do it.
So, yes, I'm just looking for a good example. So here's one, the pink, that's F. That is an example of like you're conditionally used no matter what, no matter how they are named. And then right here on the other slide here is an example of G, where if we were to update the hours at this location, and you were dispensary operating at this location, you could just do an over the counter, extend your operating hours to whatever the commission decides.
Yeah.
In that option A.
And the one on Iowa,
Let's scroll together. It's
Gravelly Park,
And I'm not asking Alderman Aldrich to answer this question, but if we were making an economic decision, the question is, how much impact would a change from 8 to 10 versus 8 to 12? What's that economic impact? We're talking about city income. Is it that great? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 50% increase in business that we're anticipating it to impact? I'm not asking for an answer. I just think that's a point of knowledge. And when we're developing research, do these things. If you're gonna use that argument, have the answer for that argument. That's just a point of preference. If you say it's gonna rate, it's gonna make 2%, it's gonna increase the sales by 2% going to 12 o'clock. Well, is it worth the communal issues that come along with it?
So I guess Miriam, was the reason you all chose 10 p.m., like, can you restate the reason?
Yeah, that was just to eliminate any competitive disadvantage within the region for dispensaries
Sorry, why-
operating within the
I guess
state.
I'm getting at, why didn't you choose midnight? Like, what was the reasoning with going with 10?
let's look at this competing slide, the
Yeah.
competing city slide.
Oh, sure. Oh, here we are. It's rare. There are cities going to 10 p.m. We have none going past 10 p.m. currently. I think to answer your question about why not later than 10 p.m. And like I said before, I don't think I have my finger on the pulse of the issue and how the community feels, but in my interactions with community members, including during commission hearings, I guess it's my assessment that this is a use people are still getting used to. And there are some communities in the city that, are gonna feel fully comfortable. And then there's some that will feel differently. Because I think this is an issue really in the country that's rapidly evolving and I think people are getting used to it. I don't know, I guess that's kind of the core of why that.
So because of that sum, there's this advance to 10. And for the sum, the ability, if we combine A and B, to go and get a conditional use, have it vetted with the community and later than 10.
So, go ahead.
I was gonna say, why did you pick 10 instead of 9?
Oh, so there would be no disadvantage for
Any-
dispensaries in the city compared to, if I'm
You
like,
say in Collinsville.
yeah, that's right. So if I'm somebody, I see it's 9:30 in the city and I want to find a dispensary, I will have no reason to go outside the city of St. Louis if the hour is 10 p.m.
And then Commissioner Williams, ask you a question. You said you you sound like you're a fan of conditional use. So I guess my question to you is, are you open to the option of A and B that we extended to either? I guess my question really is, is it the hours that bother you, or it's more you would rather if it changes at all from 8 PM to a later hour, that should be through conditional use?
No, I agree with A because it puts us on par with our peers in the region. I think that's important. And then I said I'm a fan of the conditional.
So you'd be
use
open to a
process.
combo of A and B.
Right. Midnight, it gives me concerns, but not because I can sit here and imagine what could happen. More so because there's just not a lot of information out there yet. It's such a young topic. I don't know what I don't know.
And as Miriam presented, there are existing places in different parts of the city with different characteristics, where there might be venues that are all around them that are open to 12.
Yeah, that's another thought I had.
And those venues might show up at a conditional use hearing and say, hey, it'd be nice for our customers leaving our venue to be able to go there. And in other places, there may be, no, this is in a neighborhood, you should stay capped at 10.
And currently we have no zoning text that speaks to proximity, right? This, right?
I'm going to recognize Commissioner Garmedia again with her hand, but as she gets ready to speak, I noticed Chicago says 9 o'clock. Do we have idea of what directly across the river in the metro is?
Yeah.
Is it 10 or, because you have Chicago at 9?
Yeah.
What do you, yeah,
No, I also think Edwardsville, 10 PM.
okay. Commissioner Garmedia?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate, that I think a lot of this is not, like, I think we should hear from the community and and I think we should hear, and there's an opportunity for that to happen at the Board of Aldermen. So I'm really focused on preserving flexibility, for the aldermen, because if we were to pass option, A with the 10 PM, Alderman Aldridge does not have the option. He has no, to negotiate 11 PM or midnight. I'd like to have the opportunity to make the motion for the less conservative option of midnight. Even if members of the planning commission don't agree, just because then he has to earn more votes. And we'd hear from community, at that point. So I'm really interested in not having this issue come back before the planning commission. And if, we go more flexible and allow, the public another opportunity to testify at a Board of Aldermen hearing to influence their aldermen, there'll definitely be the opportunity for that. And it may end up being, what he's able to get enough votes on to pass is 10 PM. But if we vote at least on the option of midnight, no matter what we say, whether it has the votes or not, it gives them the opportunity to negotiate that with the public and members of and other aldermen. So I just want to reiterate that before we jump into making any motions. I'd like to have the opportunity to make that motion for the more, the less conservative option of 10 PM. I'm interested in us being competitive. I know it's not, we're not yet, there's not a ton of dispensaries looking for a location right now, but I'd love for us to be competitive, for dispensaries to relocate, if they, have permitted by right that midnight option. Thanks.
I'll make an observation that of course we solicited the public to be able to come here at the public hearing. That's part of our procedure. The planning commission with the different perspectives of our members have looked at this. And one of the things that is being offered as a beneficial solution to this, to be allowing for differences within our 62 square miles, is do the option A with an extended hour to the defined time and allow a conditional use for somebody coming in from a specific area of town to have also the ability for the public to come in and weigh in the conditional use.
Okay. So let me go back and review what our options are, about the options. We are going to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen of what we as commission have. The staff has given us multiple pick and choose menus. So at this point, I can't put and say, are we gonna do A, B, or C? I'm going to ask each commissioner to give me your desire. And then out of that, we'll take what that is and entertain a motion on the group's desire. Does that make sense?
Is C midnight or?
No,
A and B?
I think everything I'm hearing right now in general is 10. But during your statement, I'm open to hearing what your time is. So I will start with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. What is your pleasure?
Quickly, would it be helpful to kind of update B to also include a cap of midnight for this?
I don't think so right at this second.
sorry.
Listen.
Okay.
Not right at this second.
Say letters, you want us to describe
Yes, yeah, just, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm still kind of the same, even after this conversation, in the same space I was in before, even knowing that, you know, as my role on the Board of Aldermen, I know I'm going to hear and be able to work, with the public in our hearings, but I don't wanna sabotage it today with not getting to a space where we can collectively get it out, you know? And I understand, you know, because I work closely with my colleagues, and I understand, Alderman Aldridge's, position very clearly. So since the option is not up there, I guess I'll wait to see if Commissioner Garmendi is even gonna be able.
Well, the your option, say,
He just wants to hear what your preference is, so that he's pre-negotiating before anyone makes a motion.
Oh.
So he just wants to know your opinion.
That's it for opinions. This is not, yes.
Oh, well, that's
He
my,
does not want a motion.
that's my opinion. I mean, clearly as an alder, and I know, and I'm, you know, work closely with my colleagues, and see the value in I don't know the monetary value in 12, but, I also being sitting right next to one of my constituents, know the value of a conditional use hearing. Wait to see what they do.
Okay.
So I want to make sure I understand what you say. Were you saying that you liked what's listed up there, one of those, or a different one? Are you saying you like, I think originally you liked option B, everything through conditional use?
No.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Oh, I just want to understand.
Yeah, so the extended of hours through conditional use process, originally when we were just talking about 12, okay, that made sense that we did 12, but now I did also get caught up in Commissioner Bradley's pathway of if it goes, where does the ball drop, you know, where can it go from there? So the extended hours, I think that's too vague. I don't know for that one specifically what that would be like if we do 12 and then extend it. I don't know, you know, because he talked about how that could go off in a tangent. So, again, if you can come back to me, because, you know, I have that balance and that I have to make, especially the next, no, I'm just kidding. Right.
Started, before we go much longer, question, but we'll go to Mary and to our legal thing. If we extend by right an option for a class of business at a location to have hours that go to midnight, and something happens later in that industry, in that particular use, that makes it be disruptive and not popular surrounding environment. Is there any way to cut back their hours?
Yes. Through the revocation process.
Of,
Wow,
of the permit itself?
which would be pretty severe.
Yeah, which.
And hard.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how many times the revocation process has.
So it's always easier to go up than it is to go down.
So.
Proactive is always better.
Revocation
Yeah.
hearings? Yes.
Do they?
Judge was concerned because he gets a number of them that can be used and then we have.
And how many are successful percentage?
Probably about half of them get, and about half of them come into compliance because they realize they're gonna lose their occupancy permit.
And the revocation must have to have some grounding so they don't go to court and.
Violation of one of the conditions. So
That's on a condition.
remember that this is different than any other use in the zoning code. It has automatic conditions attached to it. So even though you have those automatic conditions and didn't go to a hearing, it'll be just like a home occupancy waiver that has automatic conditions. If they're violating any, it's an automatic revocation hearing at the Board of Adjustment.
So extending the hours to 12,
Mm-hmm.
the dispensary has conditions on that already.
Right, they have a bunch of conditions. There's like the 13 conditions.
Give us a reminder of some of this. We're trying to just get a reminder, understand.
So all of the marijuana facilities have the 13 conditions on them that are on page 16 of the report. Then in addition, the dispensaries have 10 additional hours on them.
Hours?
I'm sorry, 10 additional conditions on them. So even if you're used by right, if you violate any of these conditions, you're gonna go to the Board of Adjustment for
Page 16.
Yes.
So some other examples would be, has to be in a permanent fixed structure. Okay, so that's a good example. Shall display a sign on the interior of the facility, helping to ensure that they're meeting state license requirements. The facility shall not allow customers who are in cars to consume the sold products in cars parked on the facility. So if you're in a parking lot, you can, immediately consume the products that you bought inside. The hours shall not erect or use any freestanding signage. So just to give some.
It's of a, I'm gonna call it a nuisance type. And if you're disturbing the neighborhood, none of these are addressing.
And zoning doesn't address the nuisance.
Yes,
There's
yes,
a nuisance.
Separate, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the conditions. If the problem is a nuisance that's being created, it doesn't violate the conditions there.
No, if they're creating a nuisance, though, they could be. That.
Right.
I will note that they felt. Not to interrupt.
Right,
Yeah, just to note, I would
thank you.
Not
Mr. Bradley, go ahead.
So Mary, let me ask a question about that. So those conditions that you said they have with them as dispensaries, if they violate any of those, they go to Board of Adjustment, correct?
If they were granted as a use by right, or if they were granted through the Board of Adjustment. If they were granted through a conditional use hearing, then it will be back at BPS for a revocation hearing.
Okay.
All depends on the underlying zoning and how it was originally granted.
Depends on how it was originally granted.
Right.
Great. Okay. Thank you for answering that.
Okay.
We keep going.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I'm sure which the staff did not have a chance to give us because we pressed them on time, is what the what state guidelines are involved in this. Like, these are 13 of our municipality issues, am I correct?
So these two different sets of conditions that are automatically attached to them, they were largely developed from the conditions that the state originally had on these uses. We understand the state has changed those, at least that's what the industry is telling us. But we just haven't had an opportunity to have an attorney that is familiar with Missouri law, sit down and walk us through. There could be many of these conditions that the state has changed and we're being more restrictive. We just don't know that.
We did though, and this is reflected in the resolution, try to describe how many licenses we think are likely to be granted. So like how many more, at what volume do we expect to be coming?
Rich, is your hand back up again, or is that remaining?
We'll Rich and Garmendi have hands.
Okay, Ben, and let me ask this question, and, okay, Commissioner Garmedia, go ahead.
Just a quick note, I didn't realize we were waiting for like a legal opinion on the state rules, but that's something, we have an attorney that works for the board. He can debrief the board on that. the alderman can also request City Councilor Hamilton to provide an opinion, or she'll assign it to a staff person. That's something we can have for the hearing at the Board of Aldermen. That's any concern, it can, and that can reflect, that input could be reflected in the final bill.
That's for the Board of Aldermen, but for us at this moment, that's not available to us to answer these questions that we're dealing with. The other question I have, and this is gonna, I know this is gonna piss somebody off. Why are we deciding that right now? Without the full information?
Why are we?
We're trying to get something to the Board of Aldermen right now without having 100% of our detailed information.
Staff was trying to do our best to meet the deadline, the commission gave us. I think if we're still interested in learning from this kind of new way of taking up zoning text amendments, I think this is one of the reasons staff should be in charge of determining its workflow and the readiness of items for the planning commission. Especially, I mean, the legal input, obviously, and if community input is a priority for the planning commission's discussion, we need time to be able to both assemble information needed for informed community discussion and then invite the community for discussion prior to a formal public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Young, you wanted to,
Oh, Commissioner Benton.
Commissioner Manton.
Are we going back to our?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel for where we are.
So,
And let me back, before you say it is 7:02, where this conversation by 7:15 we can't round robin this thing all night.
So in general, my thoughts are, to me, this type of business is no different than any other merchandising business if you're not consuming it on the property. Ideally, my opinion would be, I don't think there should be any limitation to hours of operation and use by right zones. However, I totally understand that this is a new thing that people are dealing with and have opinions on. So I'm leaning towards the option A plus B right now.
And when you say that, you mean 10 PM?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner West.
In my ideal world, we'd be doing option B, but I am okay with option A plus B with the 10 o'clock time.
Okay. Commissioner Bradley.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with option A plus B because I think it gives us all the latitude to do everything that we need to do. It extends the hours to comparable to what everybody else is doing. But if we want to go beyond, it gives an easier vehicle to go through conditional use rather than a Board of Adjustment variance.
Okay, thank you. We know what Commissioner Garmedia is, but we'll ask her anyway.
Thanks. I would like to offer the option C, which is option, I guess we can make it option A plus B, but instead of 10 PM midnight. And if that motion were to fail, I'd be a yes vote for option A plus B.
Thank you. Commissioner Kell.
I'm open to midnight, but I'm also okay with 10 PM as well. Just on a personal note, what I guess I'm not hearing from the table and what Rich has been bringing up is if we do B on like the A plus B, like, are we putting an end time still? Or are we saying that's an infinite and everyone's okay with that? Okay.
If I'm understanding it correct, the end time cannot go beyond state limits first. And as a variance, that comes back to your office if they want to go beyond that. So if dispensary A wants to open to 1 o'clock, they can request a variance based on, as long as it does not exceed the state timing, correct?
Depending on what it might be a variance or it might be a condition.
There's an option for them, yes.
But we, as a commission, are not gonna recommend an end time with B. I'm just clarifying to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay.
But maybe a state end time, that's it, or it would be up to the determination as it stands now during the permitting.
If the state says 2 o'clock, they can't go beyond that, no matter what the variance or whatever option they get, they can't go beyond that. Okay, Commissioner Williams?
Speaking to the midnight thing first, I think if all things were equal, I don't see myself being opposed to midnight either, but all things are not equal, so.
So,
With that, I mean, I'm comfortable with this being.
so as a norm, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing option A, B. The only question is it 12 or 10? That's the only issue I'm hearing in this room. Is that, am I correct with that one?
Yeah.
I would be willing to vote on 12 first and seeing how that does and then going to 10.
I think we, just to make it clear for the alderman though, who has to take this back to the committee, it's the flexibility of up to 12. We're okay with 10 if that's where we land. I just want our motion to be really clear if we did it. In other words, we don't want it to fail at the board either if they don't approve 12.
Sure.
Yeah.
So with that, I will open the floor for a motion. Any further discussion? Any statements from staff?
Oh, wait, I do actually, before we vote, I would like staff's opinion one last time, because this does modify what you guys recommended. If we do the up to 12, and is there any big concerns from you guys that you want to voice?
So what you're describing is option A plus B with an up to 12?
Yeah.
Changing that from 10.
A blanket 12 then with the condition.
Saying 12 or saying up to 12 is the same thing. There's no difference. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah,
If
but
say
when
up
we
to
make
12,
the
we should-
motion, we just wanted to be clear when it reaches the Board of Aldermen that the planning commission was okay with 10. Because we don't want it to fail for them if they hold it that we are only okay with midnight.
You're saying establish a floor and a ceiling, not just a ceiling.
So the letter you send to the Board of
I
Aldermen
don't know if this,
say that.
on a staff level, we're overlooking if we do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. But it's a statement. Let's be sure, I want to be sure they heard.
Yeah.
That
So
this,
clarification was that the board bill can't say up till midnight. The recommendation to the Board of Aldermen could.
Is
But
to
the-
pick a time.
Right, but the
Not
board
up
bill gonna have to say a time.
they're gonna have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can be really clear in the motion. They have to pick a time. They can't.
Well, and real, so this would be a very new, it's for the planning commission to recommend a spectrum of appropriate options. And before the planning commission chooses to do that, I think they should be aware that that is kind of a very new door to open, where the planning commission is letting go of a lot of its specific authority in shaping specific zone regulation.
Poison more than girls.
So, you don't want us to pick a time. Okay, that's fine.
I'm just describing that my understanding of the practice for the planning commission's entire existence since 1999 is that the planning commission has recommended a specific set of regulations for the board's consideration.
Well, keeping in mind, John Doe does not have to extend his hours either.
Yeah,
If he
but
chooses, if he's in a neighborhood, he or she knows, I'm gonna catch flack if I go to 12, I'll just stay at 10 and stay, or 8 or whatever it is. All right, last question, Commissioner Gomedia.
I just wanted to note that what happened with planning last session with special residential uses is the planning commission made a recommendation that was more progressive than what the board was willing to do. And now the board can't even pass any any update to the SRU legislation without coming back to the planning commission. So I think there's some benefit to us having a flexible recommendation or the up to midnight option. Just because the planning commission might in some cases be more progressive than the Board of Aldermen. And so I think I appreciate Miriam's context. I hope we can be have a more flexible recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So The planning commission has a role to do. It's diligent and staffed well to do that role. And we want to maintain doing that role as firmly, professionally as possible. If something has to come back, we appreciate it having to come back, and we'll take it up and put the work into evaluating and helping again.
Thank you. So I will, again, I go back to, I will entertain a motion from the commissioners. And you'll have to state what your motion is.
Chair Garmendia would like to make a motion?
Sure, I can make the motion. I move that the planning commission recommends that we extend by permit to extend hours to midnight and allowing further extension of hours through a conditional use process.
Okay. So thank you. So hers was to extend to midnight and allow further extended hours through a conditional use process. That is her motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been seconded by Commissioner Hubbard, our Alderman Clark Hubbard.
Can I ask for a point of clarification
Point of-
from Christina's motion?
Yes.
Christina, that's not up to, right? You're just
No,
choosing a
she
number.
said extended hours too.
Up to.
We were saying up to.
No, she did not. That was not her motion.
Okay.
Her motion was extended hours too. That's why I clarified it.
Okay, I wanna withdraw my second.
Okay,
thought-
I will withdraw my motion to redo it. I wanna, I move that we adopt, or we make a recommendation that we extend hours up to midnight. And allow further extended hours through a conditional use process.
And hers is extended. The key word is up to midnight. And
We're not requiring anybody to be open to.
I understand, but I'm just having to entertain the motion. Is there a second to her extended up to? It is seconded. Call for vote, please.
I think I want to clarify again, the up to,
Is the language in which we're sending in?
is that Commissioner Garmendia's intent?
Yes.
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 So wait, the language in the recommendation sent to the Board of Aldermen or the regulation in the?
The recommendation.
Okay.
That we're saying yes.
Okay.
Now, the commission has an option to make a vote. Call for vote.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Banton,
Nay.
Commissioner Boaz,
Nay.
Commissioner Bradley,
Nay.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Aye.
Commissioner Keon,
Nay.
Commissioner Williams,
Nay.
Chair Strother,
Nay.
and the motion does not pass.
Okay. So up to 12 midnight did not pass. I would entertain another motion if there is one.
I would motion to extend hours to midnight and then add the conditional use to allow further extended hours. So option A and B, but changing that to midnight.
So extended hours to 12 midnight, allow further extended hours through a conditional use process.
That wasn't part of the first motion?
No.
No.
What? That,
Turning
Right.
up to was-
So that would give the Board of Aldermen
that's
the
right.
range to choose a number, and I'm being very specific what the planning commission recommendation is.
So when they approve, if they approve a bill, it has to say to midnight, not up to or variance.
It can't say 11. It can't say 11. It can't say.
Yeah, it would say 8 AM to 12, not 8 AM to 10 or 11 or 12. The,
Up to allow the board of aldermen to pick the hour between 10 and 12.
Now we're saying it has to be 12 or it has to come back to the planning commission.
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Everybody understands what was just said?
Say it for me one more time, the old guy in the way.
What now? We don't argue about that. We don't argue about that, but
That's why I asked Mary a question.
yeah. Okay, David, did you?
The motion is to extend it up to 12.
No, the motion is extended to 12 PM, meaning that if it goes to the Board of Aldermen and it does not pass at 12, it has to then come back. Am I correct, Dana?
That's right.
Okay,
And the 12 is a cap.
is,
No, it's the,
What was it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so business can choose to be open till 10 if they don't want to be
Yes,
open,
but-
if that's what you're asking.
Board of Alderman cannot change it to 11 o'clock.
The line in the bill that says right now 8 to 10 would change 8 to 12.
But yes, allowing further extended hours to be used. And so there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Am I right?
Second.
Commissioner? I'm sorry, Commissioner Garmedia,
Second, I'll second.
call for vote, please.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Banton,
Nay.
Commissioner Boaz,
Nay.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yay.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Keon. Aye. Commissioner Williams.
Staying.
Stratton.
Nay,
And the motion does not pass.
okay. Is there any other motion to be considered? I will make a motion.
I would like to make the motion that we accept option A plus B as recommended by the executive staff of the planning.
Second. Okay, this vote is that that the motion as printed, option A plus B, extended hours to 10, allow further extended hours through a conditional use process. Still does mean if an industry wants, and I'm sorry, still means that if somebody wants to extend their hours, they can do that through a variance or a conditional use. So they're not limited, but as a baseline, this is the 10 o'clock. Call for vote.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Banton,
Aye.
Commissioner Boaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Aye.
Commissioner Keon,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stratton.
Aye.
And the motion passed with all persons voting none.
Hey, we still got some passed, but Senate and Congress couldn't do it. Okay, let's take a deep breath. This is a very charged conversation, but that's what the commission is for, to make these decisions, make these recommendations, because it still goes to the Board of Aldermen and still has opportunities and obstacles ahead of it either way. But we've done the work. I want to duly thank the staff for putting in the work in the short time they can. Thank you, Mary, for being part of that. It is not easy when we have split conversations like this. Most of the time, we're able to just all jump on one side or the other, but this one, it's some real heated issues. To the alder persons that have to deal with your constituents, we hope that we do not handcuff you, but we also hope that we're supporting you so that you're not left in alerts that says you have something to do. With that, there are some businesses that Don has to do. Or had some comments.
I'll just add on to you and supporting you through sound professional practice related to planning. With that, that's our last action item, but Miriam's going to give a brief update on the major planning projects because we do have a lot of work to do. We want to remind you.
And this will be the briefest update in the world, but we're just trying to make this part of what we share at the planning commission, because we are doing a lot of exciting work and want the planning commission to be aware of it and involved in it. So this is kind of the chart we keep referring to, but there's a couple of quick updates about the strategic land use plan. We're midway into this kind of current major engagement push where we're getting focused input around the detailed map. We, since last month, have held 11 workshops and have 3 upcoming and several more still being scheduled. And we're targeting late September or early October for a launch party for Scoop number 3, which will be a sort of a release, if you will, of where the planning ideas lock in. Fun picture. Neighborhood planning, Jonathan and his team are doing a ton of work, helping to guide and support Project Connect neighborhood planning and launching neighborhood plans in the other or additional 3 planning clusters, and kind of call out in very close coordination with Commissioner Williams for all of his work with For the Bill and the Cultural Boulevard project. Very exciting. Zoning code updates. Very exciting. We with the selection committee that includes Dawn, Mary, and 2 of our commissioners, Commissioner Young and Commissioner Garmendia, approved an RFP and it is now posted, and we are seeking proposals from qualified consulting teams to help us update or overhaul our zoning code and zoning map. Sorry, I'm a little raining in. Have a pre-submittal meeting this Friday for interested applicants, the goal being to give them kind of the full context that they need to develop a quality proposal. If you want to tune in, just let me know. I can share the link.
Take a plot, take a plot.
Good stuff, but I maybe I'll emphasize this a little bit more. I think this zoning code update is going to be very hard work. And I think kind of keeping our collective eyes on the prize and preparing for that and building kind of understanding and trust with the community is kind of core importance. Without that, we will not be as successful as with it. So I just think the strategic land use plan, neighborhood planning, and the zoning code, they all are kind of part of a really important puzzle to move the city forward. So very good.
1, 3 delegated items. It's a street right away within the Darcy Webby complex. Darcy Webby is getting a complete overhaul comprehensively, and they're redoing the street pattern in it, possible vacation. Other informational items, my executive director's report. Great, as you can see, the great volume of work that staff is doing. My first report will introduce James Fisker, who's sitting against the back wall there, who is now part of Merriam's staff, and is a welcome addition. Welcome, Jake. Yeah.
Hey, Jane.
He's both talented and modest. But also in the Rook format and of the planning commissioners, there is a meeting scheduled on Friday for folks that are working on the process of changing some of our guidance policies for the planning commission. There'll be more from staff tomorrow on that. We talked about workload. It is pretty huge. But one of the things that's happening with us is Meg Lestow, my team, who run Dr. Resources Office, her last day is in front. She is moving to the Netherlands. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Figure out. Okay, but and it's a time that's busy for staff. We have consultants that are working with them. Some of my time will now down the hall a little bit more than this. But the big thing I want to say is we say the next commission meeting is August 14th. Stay tuned. We will find a meeting time in August. Because one of the things that's happening is right now in July, this was 25 years ago when the first staff of PDA was hired into the Planning and Urban Design Agency. And it was in October that we had the first planning commission meeting formulated as we have. So in August, we're going to find a time when we can get the most participation in person. And there may be some business to conduct, and there may be some cheers to make. And so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, samples of consistency we just dealt with. No.
What I heard is non-promised cookies and brownies.
We may actually quickly to some other locations.
Brownies.
With that, I hope everybody had a safe holiday and still have all the fingers and toes and elements that they didn't. And nothing burned and no insurance claims made. The balance of your summer until August. Thank you. Have a good July, and we'll see what happens right now when the Cardinals are on their second game. Second game, a doubleheader today. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second has been, meeting adjourned, recording off. Thank you all.